Welcome to episode 14 of What's the Point of Loyalty, the not so regular vlogcast mini series about loyalty, the customer kind. I'm Adam Posner, and the human I am chatting with today has real intelligence rather than the artificial kind. And I'm delighted to welcome Bri Williams. Hi, Bri. Welcome to What's the Point of Loyalty. Now, for the audience, I know Bri really well. In fact, a plug for Bri, and I'm happy to say this on this, is that you helped me many years ago get some of my pricing strategies right, and I still use them to this day. So you've helped me, frame them, and maybe we can talk about that, but it's not really the point of this conversation. So I still wanted to publicly say that you're terrific at what you do, and you did help me. But I did ask Perplexity about you, and I was told you're a behavioral science expert, a real estate agent, a TikTok influencer. So tell us, which Bri are you?
Yeah, and it's unusual because Bri spelt BRI is fairly unusual. So I can claim the behavioral science.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm an influencer on TikTok, but I certainly have content on TikTok. There is a real estate agent, I believe, in Canberra called
Ah,
Bri Williams. So
oh.
congratulations to her. Hope she's doing well.
So you don't believe everything you'd read on the internet. Maybe that was the first lesson I just learned.
Well, that's right. Don't rely on everything. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad you did your due diligence though, Adam. I appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit about you. I know I gave a little bit of a background to who you are and what you, well, just this little intro. But for the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, for the last 15 years, and we did get to meet each other early on in that period of time. For the last 15 years, I've been helping people in business
Uh,
get better results. And it was really
yeah.
drawn out of a frustration I had when I was in the corporate sector of thinking we knew what our customers were doing and why, but really not, because we put things in market and the customers wouldn't respond the way we wanted to. So I immersed myself in the field of behavioral science. I
Mhm.
have a psychology and finance background,
Okay.
and I've been able to fuse that. So really my days are spent helping people in business influence behavior of either customers or, more importantly, their colleagues to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Because everything, when you think about our days, everything we do on a day-to-day basis is about getting someone to do something. So
Yeah.
whether we're writing an email or getting them to click on our website or buy from us, it's a behavioral influence opportunity. And most of the frustration in business is people not doing what we want them to do.
So do you find these days how is your services shifted on a percentage basis from your clients wanting to influence their team and colleagues versus customers? Like if you weighed that up in the kinds of work you do, where would the percentage breakdown be?
That's a really interesting question, Adam, because I've been reflecting on that, and I don't know if it's a function of what my clients are doing or whether it's where I'm being drawn to. But certainly early on in my career, it was about customer behavior
Mm,
because behavioral economics, the field that I'm more particularly involved in, was fairly new.
mm,
And so I was working a lot with marketers and sales functions on how to influence customer behavior and website design, those sorts of
yep,
things.
yep.
Then a lot of the marketing companies, so the consultancies,
Mm,
got wind of this field called behavioral economics and they started doing that. And I'm not as close to the marketing function as they are.
mm.
So naturally, my work has moved more towards internal customers, so colleagues. And I find that interesting because we often think about external customers, forgetting that we have to influence our own behavior, but we
Mm.
also have to influence those around us on a day-to-day basis. So it's really shifted much more to the internal customer, I would say.
That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, like you, I'm a solopreneur, so I have to influence myself. But I do need to keep learning on how to influence my partners or colleagues. But then it's the customer for me, who's my client and how and what will they do to take on the services and so on. But just reading all of your amazing, and I haven't mentioned that in the beginning that you have an incredibly regular little blog. It's similar, like I feel like a little bit of the Seth Godin of the every morning the little blog that comes in and just just tips you over the edge with something interesting, and then your videos. But I think that's an amazing resource that people should tap into. But yeah, so it's fascinating to hear you, as you say, either you're focusing there or there's more need. And maybe you found that hybrid situation also, the way people work these days also changing and influencing you.
Well, certainly that's had an impact, and a good one in a sense, because a
Mm,
lot of my work is, I'm based in Melbourne, and a lot of
mm,
my work is either international or
wow,
interstate, and I can do a lot of it remotely,
mm,
which is great. I have found more an appetite for in-person training
mm,
rather than through the pandemic phase where we
mm,
all did everything online. I think people have a natural fatigue around
mm,
that. But yeah, I think the interesting thing around behavioral science, and we'll touch on it a bit today, is whilst we might immediately think of our external customer, in order to ultimately influence that external customer, we often have to change our internal behaviors.
yeah.
So we have to put our programs together differently, or make sure the CEO is comfortable with the change in direction of our marketing campaign, all those
Mm,
sorts of things. So ultimately, in order to have the external customer impact, we have to work through those layers. So the beauty for anyone who's interested in behavioral science and behavioral economics and doing some reading on it is to not just wear the external customer hat, but really think about, well, how can I apply it within my business, within my life? And you get maximum bang for buck, because the same techniques we can use in a consumer setting, we can use in our work setting.
mm. We'll get to some of those practical ideas a little bit later, but I have got a standard question that I'm always fascinated to ask, and I never know how people will take it. But so, Bri, are you an insider, an outsider, a maker, a shaker, or a cake baker?
That's an example of Adam's surreal thinking, isn't it? Having a question like that. Look, I'm going to say all of it, all of the above,
Oh,
for different reasons. So I think all of us can touch on those elements. I'm mainly closest to educator, which I know wasn't on
ah,
your list, but
wow.
ultimately, I think in order to make things, in order to shake
Mm,
things, bake them, whatever, it's all about trying to share insights and
yeah.
lift all boats, all of those sorts of things.
Okay, so you're my first guest that's pretty much taken all of them and given me a new one. But with you,
What are you
I
though,
never
Adam?
knew, I never
What
knew
do you,
what, I mean, I remember every time I was like, oh, I've answered your question, you'd come back with more. You're just, yeah, you always pushed me a little bit more. And that's what I loved about working with you. You're never shy in taking that one step further. So, uh, I've heard someone say to me, my next question is often asked in interviews. But yeah, if I found Bree's best friend and I said to Bree's best friend, what's the one word they would say about you? What would they say?
well, I did ask her, Adam, because I
Oh,
had heard your previous discussions, and she said intrepid. And I thought,
oh,
oh, that's not a word that I would have chosen for myself. And so I had to ask her why. And she's known me since primary school. Um, so she didn't say it's because I'm fearless. It's really just because I keep going and forge my own path and sort of explore different areas. I was also camping at the time, so that might have given her a sense of inspiration. But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
intrepid.
Oh, nice. Well, the travel company will love you for that.
That's
Uh,
true. Brought to you by,
yeah.
yeah.
And so what about the person who perhaps misunderstands you?
You really like to shake things up, don't you? So you're probably a shaker, not a baker. But
Mm,
I remember once getting some feedback when I was in corporate that someone had said I was arrogant.
mm,
And it's not a word that I would have assumed in myself, but perhaps no one
mm.
who is arrogant does. But it gave me pause, because I
Mm,
think I am an introverted person.
mhm.
So this is my justification for being called arrogant.
Right.
I'm
Okay.
an introverted person, so I do a lot of my processing internally. So I can take quite a while to come up with a view, but
Mm,
by the time it spits out of the processing machine,
mm,
I'm fairly fixed on it,
mm,
because I've done a lot of that thinking. And maybe sometimes I don't take people on that same journey. And that's how I think it can sometimes be expressed as arrogance or sort of a closed mindedness. And so ever since I've had that feedback, I've been more mindful of how I share with people what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm loving this aspect of you identifying that about yourself. And again, I feel as like even though we haven't had time together for a number of years, I do feel like you do when you come forward with your ideas or suggestions, they are straight, they're direct, and they're confident.
Mm.
And clearly, that's a good way you've just described it. Now it now makes sense to me, and it reminds me of a view because I've had people say, "Oh, you're too South African, Adam. You're too direct. Slow down." Those sorts of things. And someone once mentored me and said, "Strong views held lightly." So confident and in belief in what you have to offer or say, but not so stuck or fixed to take another point of view and or allow people, because you do, not you, but generally we can turn people away for those who aren't confident enough to challenge.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, I think that's a beautiful expression of that because yeah, for all the reasons we've just talked about.
yeah, yeah,
I don't take things superficially, and so by the time I have come up with my thinking, whether it's right or wrong, I tend to certainly project a sense of confidence,
yeah,
even
absolutely.
though I could be quite persuaded otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally love it. All
Mhm.
right, so this was Get to Know Bri. That was lovely. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable and open. It always helps as we get to know humans underneath the veneer. So let's get into the topic. So, Bri, what's your view of the point of loyalty?
Well, for business, I think loyalty is to make money, and for customers, I think it's to save money.
Hmm, that was very short, sweet, and to the point, as
But
but
well,
clearly thought through.
I will tell you, Adam, and this is very insulting to someone who runs the point of loyalty, but I think loyalty is a lie.
Oh, loyalty is a lie. We've got to go then. Okay, so share more.
Well, I think it's a social construct that's sort of been co-opted by business, and so usually in business, what we mean by loyalty is retention. So it's a retention strategy, and I think if I define loyalty, I think of it as a conscious dedication to a brand or a product, in
Mhm.
which that I will prioritize that product or brand over things that are superior quite objectively. So that means to be loyal to a business, for instance, means that I'd be prepared to sacrifice something. And I don't think customers are necessarily willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I haven't heard that direct way of saying what loyalty is. And you may or may not know that I've got 14 dimensions of loyalty, of which one of the 14 from a consumer's perspective is pretty much I go out of my way to shop. So kind of like either it's out of my way, but I'll go out of my way for whatever reason, whether it is, as you say, to save money or because I know that the service and or whatever it is going to be amazing. So I go out of my way. And then you also said something like I sacrifice something. I love that. I've never heard that. And I would interpret that differently back to my dimensions of I'm prepared to pay a premium is another dimension of loyalty. So again, not all brands can all ask for premium, but that's a price orientation. But that conscious, I think if I paraphrase you, something to the effect you said, like sort of that conscious sacrifice, something
Conscious
like that.
dedication.
On
So
dedication.
it's and it's an emotional thing, loyalty. And I think
Ah,
loyalty is also active. So it's an active commitment to in my world,
yeah.
active commitment, and whereas retention is quite passive. And so I think loyalty in a business setting is super rare because it would be, for instance, an example which I'm sure everyone would have heard of, but it's like I need to get on a flight because I've had a family
Mhm.
circumstance which is, dreadful.
Mm,
And the airline really goes out of its way to get me on that flight.
mm,
That's an emotional connection because you've taken pain away from me, and I'm more likely to, at least for a period of time until that feeling washes away, be prefer your airline to any other, and be willing, as you mentioned, to pay a price premium or go, take a flight that isn't particularly convenient, but
mm.
it keeps me on that plane. So Yeah, that I think that's my construct of loyalty.
Hmm.
But you,
Yeah, look,
today's about discussing it because you're
yeah.
much closer to it than I am.
Well, I am, but and if loyalty is a lie, I love that sort of. It's almost like that subject header that gets you to open clickbait to open and get me going. And my blood is pumping away
Yes.
here, and I don't quite know where to go there. You've taken me by surprise a little bit. But in a way, it's kind of like, and I do a lot of research. And in fact, you called me out many years ago when I started my For Love or Money research, which was that old say do gap. And customers say one thing, but do they do another? And that's as evident as ever in typical research. But we are human with frailties. We may say something and then do we actually do it, which is kind of like that lie part.
Well, I think,
You.
and that was born out of years when I was in the corporate sector and sitting in similar, not similar research, but research environments where we would ask people about that, and we'd have these categorizations, these segmentations of, highly loyal versus whatever the categories were, and I always thought they're not loyal, they're lazy.
Ah,
It's inertia. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing for a business, because I think we need to design for our customers, in effect, to be lazy. And by lazy, I mean content. We want them content and satisfied so that they aren't provoked into reconsidering the category. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice in business by even thinking about, and this is where it will get contentious for you, thinking about loyalty as our objective, when I think our objective should be habituation. It should be building products, ecosystems, and what have you, so that naturally people, in their status quo bias, in their desire to leave things as they are going to be very comfortable to do that. And that's, I think, where you get bang for buck, rather than, and we can talk more about this, but trying to chase an affective state, as in an emotional state, rather than effective state, which is behavioral. Trying to chase affective, so how they feel about us,
yeah.
then becomes very tenuous, because feelings fluctuate. I love you today, I don't love you tomorrow. Whereas if you design settings for behavior, it's like, we don't need to keep pumping up their tires and making them feel special and feeling good, because they're just going to default to us because we're providing the best of what they need or want.
I kind of, if I had to rewind back a few minutes ago when you gave your airline example, there they did something that emotionally impacted you, right? So now it kind of, am I hearing a slight difference in this last example versus where they went out of their way, they did something because they were sensitive to a situation, you're more emotionally connected until they stuff up or do something else. And yet you're saying we shouldn't chase that sort of feeling. I think I'm hearing that feeling with customers, build more of emotional connections where we can, surprise and delight them, do stuff that they're not expected, which is not habit, break a habit with something good. I kind of feel like it's a bit of both in my land of loyalty and loyalty programs. We're trying to build, yes, habit, the word you just said, absolutely, where it's possible in a certain category. And it's always category specific and buying behavior specific. But you want to overlay and make people feel a little joyful as well, and that emotion. Do you have any thoughts on what I just ranted on about?
I think you've picked up on something so important, and it's the weighting between them. Now, in Stanford University professor BJ Fogg's work, who
Yes.
was very involved in habits, he talks about motivation and ability, and the tension between them,
Yeah.
and that motivation takes the form of a wave, in which case, it ebbs and flows. So for us personally, sort of New Year's Eve, we're pretty excited about how the new year is going to play out. And so our motivation to change is high, and then cut to 3 weeks later and we've reverted back to all of those old patterns.
Yeah.
Marketers and business people, we can spend a lot of time driving motivation, which is an emotional state. And the airline example, so we've got them with a peak emotional moment. So we've done a good thing. But that is naturally going to dissipate. So in the example I shared about the airline, I said for a time. We've got them
Mm,
for a time until that wears off and
mm,
some other reason comes up. So that's why if we do, we need to use motivation to provide, I suppose, the impetus, the spark, but really the heavy lifting is done then in the customer experience they
yeah,
engage with and how frictionless it is in the ways that make it a positive experience. And I call it the effort versus reward equation,
yeah,
but really, and we can talk about that
yeah,
later, but making sure that we're not just building the reward, but reducing the effort.
yeah. No, that's a lot of the principles there are how programs have now become more sophisticated following. I mean, behavioral science, behavioral economics, 6, 7, 8 years ago, maybe wasn't if you think of the law of innovation of diffusion, it's like I think everyone who's building programs now are sophisticated enough to understand a lot of the behavioral economics, maybe not as deep as you, but certainly there's a lot more now, like psychology and loyalty programs. In fact, in my For Love or Money 2026, I've got a whole section on that just to get some framing around that. So fascinating what you say. What's your biggest frustration with loyalty programs?
Aside from them being called loyalty. It's,
Okay, yeah, exactly.
well, I can understand. So, from an external customer perspective, I was trying to think what else could you call it? And loyalty is good when you're talking to customers because you certainly wouldn't want to go externally and say, "Oh, we're building a retention program." So it's like then you're
No,
trading them as an asset or something.
yeah.
I guess my frustration is with loyalty programs that they are left at the incentive
Uh-huh.
stage. So it's really about providing discounts and
Mm,
getting people's data in return rather than how we're actually going to build them so that they don't want to leave aside from the incentives.
mm,
What's the entire customer experience? And often you will see that in businesses, won't you, where you'll have the marketing function perhaps looking after the rewards program, aka loyalty,
mm,
and then a product team sort of in a different
mm,
division. And then it's sort of not, or even, for instance, billing and invoicing, that needs to be part of the
mm.
whole customer experience
In
in
the
order to
B2B,
engender
yeah.
a sense
Mm,
of, let's call it loyalty, but
mm,
really, a sense of doing business with each other. So, what else? I think also when we talk about loyalty as businesses, we tend to think about it's their loyalty to us
yeah,
rather than our loyalty to them.
yeah.
And I think that shift means that if we did think of it differently and we thought, well, it's our loyalty to our customers,
Mm.
we would behave differently. But you often see that tension, don't you? So, for
Oh, yeah.
instance, banking are examples. People get annoyed because I've been loyal to you for 20
Uh,
years. Well, no,
uh.
you haven't. You've been probably lazy and didn't want to switch your direct debits. But that there's sort of this expectation that builds that I should be treated specially because I've been with
Yeah,
you for a period of time, and the bank's really not nurturing that relationship and providing loyalty in return. I
yeah,
had that experience through the pandemic. Actually,
yeah.
I'd been have been with a bank for a long time, and because it sort of created my consulting business, it was like, well, what can you do to help me through this? And they really couldn't
Uh,
do any, they said they couldn't do anything.
mm.
And so they lost that opportunity. Now, have I changed banks? No, I haven't, Adam.
Yeah. You don't
So
take your own advice, eh?
they probably think I'm still loyal, but I'm not
Yeah,
loyal. I'm just
yeah,
waiting for the right moment
yeah.
to get my revenge.
Oh my God, to get my revenge. You said quite a lot in that answer, and I want to go back to
Yeah.
you first said the word loyalty in program, and furious agreement with you. And I always say every day, loyalty is not a program. And I always talk about, and I know that over the years I've helped brands just first to understand what loyalty, if it is, and I know you're challenging me, but I always say loyalty is an outcome, it's a behavior, it's a belief, it's a sense of belonging. My three B's.
Hmm.
You know what loyalty is, then you can decide what kind of program or mechanics, including finance, because it's one of financial rewards are one of 9 currencies that I know programs can use. But I think loyalty programs have a bit of a brand problem because of that word loyalty in front of the word program. And then everyone also because potentially they're lazy or they've been educated. They think everything's a points program, and that's just because the world has been educated thanks to the frequent flyers and various other points mechanics. So let's get
I,
on to a little,
I
yeah,
was just
go.
going to say, just on that, some of the language that when I was thinking about our conversation today, even the language that we used, you've earned points
Yeah.
or you've got to work towards points. It's like, why are we asking effort of people? So I don't know. That seems to be a convention in a lot of
It
loyalty
is.
programs. Congratulations, you've earned things, and to a degree, there's a sense of you skin in the game. So I've toiled, and so now you're rewarding me. But why not? And we mentioned it earlier: intermittent rewards and surprise and joyalty, which I love as an expression of yours. But reward me not for, you know, having to achieve a particular level, because it's like you're putting effort back on the customer. I find it quite peculiar.
Oh, I love your dissection of that. And words are often, when you stop and take a breath and you really think about it like you've done, versus just a standard. Everyone says earn and burn, and everyone says get to the tier. And I mean, because programs have been built off the back of gaming. Loyalty programs, by definition, are games. You know, goals, rules, feedback. Here's goals, meaning you do this, you get to that point. You know, here's the rules, here's the feedback. Well done, you got the tier, and you know, and rinse and repeat. So, but the analysis of the word you've earned, yeah, that's made me think even more about. I think I might still use it, and I'm not going to change the world, but I still love the way you've expressed that. Um, so, Bri, you might have a 9-year-old around in your life, or a 10 or a 7-year-old, or someone you know is pretty in that age group, and they say, "Hey, Bri, what do you do?" What do you say?
Again, I had thought about this and I found it difficult to come up with a metaphor, but I am fond of a metaphor. I would say, Adam, you know how when you go snorkeling or you go swimming, and I
Mm,
know you swim, but you're
mm.
a bit older than 9. You know how when you put your goggles on, you can see things so much more clearly. You can see what's happening below the surface. Well, that's what I do with people in business. I effectively give them goggles so they can see what's happening below the surface of their customers or their colleagues, to see really what's happening in terms of why they're making the decisions that they're making. So
Mm.
that's how I would I would attempt to describe it.
I love the goggle analogy, and thanks for playing right into my passion point. Clearly, you gave it some thought, or yes, so thank you. Yeah, beautiful, and I'm sure a 9-year-old will get it because they put goggles on and know what they can see underwater. So that's
It's a
beautiful.
whole new, as you and I both know, when we've been ocean swimming, it's a whole new world down there. And I think for business people, and I certainly, before I really immersed myself, no pun intended, in behavioral science, I sort of took what I assumed I knew about customer behavior from, the tropes that we were
Mm,
using in marketing and product that I was working in. And then a whole new world was revealed to me of hundreds of biases and heuristics, so decision-making shortcuts, how people are wired to make decisions. And once you see them, you can't ever unsee them. And that's the exciting thing about it, because if, for instance, if any watchers or listeners are sort of feeling a little bit stuck, it
mm.
can completely open you up again, because you've only been seeing the top of the water, and yet there's a whole world underneath that, if you understand that, can really refresh the approach that you might take
Yeah.
to your business and your customers and your colleagues.
Yeah. So let's dig in, and I'm happy to critique loyalty programs in fact, that's why you're here today. I'd love you to critique them and explain to us a little bit about some of the nudges and or behavioral science. I don't know what you call them, biases, mechanics, whatever you want to call them. The terminology is yours around what are programs generally should use, are using. Maybe there's a lot in that question that you could consider answering 3 or 4 of them, or however many you think are relevant.
And I must say, I don't spend a whole lot of time engaging in loyalty programs. I know some people, when you're talking about gamification, one of my friends, she is completely onto it. So she'll switch credit cards and she'll energy providers because she's very much points oriented. So actually, she's the antithesis of a loyal customer. The more I think about it, but she's a very good loyalty program player. But
Yeah.
so these are the sorts of things as we interrogate loyalty programs that most people listening and watching would understand. So scarcity is a big one. So limited access to something, so VIP access, for instance, or something's limited time or limited availability. So giving people sort of the jump start and getting them to the top of the queue, making them feel special from that perspective. So scarcity, but that's used in marketing all the time.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
of course overused. The rug shop is still closing down. Sunk cost is another really important behavioral principle. So sunk cost is, for instance, and I know Amazon Prime isn't a loyalty program per se, but I think it's a very effective customer program. So, for instance, now that I've paid my membership, I'm going to use it more because and that they keep reinforcing how much I've saved in delivery every time I use it, because it's a sunk cost to me. I've paid my money. Now I want to get a return on that money. Much like people who turn up to a buffet, all you can eat buffet, and they stuff themselves full of food that they don't want because they've put the money down. And similar to that concept called loss aversion, which is, we're more worried about what we have to lose than gain. And so having a points balance to have to walk away from if you change provider is a point of pain for people. And so businesses tend to use a bit of loss aversion in there, and very much identity. So having an in-group and an out-group. So if you're you're in the in-group, if you are like us. And so you might look at Priceline Sister Club or other loyalty programs that kind of say that we're all the same. You're in the in-group becomes important. So those are some of the principles that people would be familiar with. Some of the things that people get wrong, we've already touched on, and that's a reliance on motivation and a reliance on an assumption that motivation is stable. So once we've got them excited about our brand or our product, they're going to continue with us and we never have to get them excited again. And that's just not the case. We have to continue to invest time and time and time again in order to keep motivation, which is why instead of just focusing on motivation, we need to look at things like effort and friction. And I think another concept that businesses sort of dabble with but don't always get right is short-term bias. So short-term bias is our love of instant gratification. So give me the chocolate today and for the rest of the week I'll promise I'll eat salad, that sort of thing. So just give me the good stuff now.
Yeah.
And so often inducements in loyalty programs are giving me an instant 10% off or what have you. That's not engendering any sort of loyalty. That's just me getting a discount on my initial shop. Then they sort of don't support that with ongoing or intermittent rewards. So that sort of, here's your 10%, and then it's like, now you're on our database and now we're just going to bombard you with marketing messages. And it's really, I think that's a missed opportunity because we need to keep topping people up with, for instance, the unexpected birthday reward, or, here's 6-month anniversary, we're thinking of you, or whatever it happens to be. Things that surprise people.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the, obviously, the joyalty moments of magic, and I know you can't do it as a standalone, but certainly if you mix it with the right balance of, as you say, here's a short term, I get a fix, but here's something you weren't expected. And that's also, about mechanics and motivation. And as you say, playing back to you in different language. So what's sort of newish in the maybe because of AI and or anything that's happening in the world around, is there anything, those are all, I've heard those before. They're pretty standard. Everyone should consider them in loyalty program design by definition. What would you say is being missed out on, or is something out there in the back of your mind and think, that's something that should become more prevalent in by definition a loyalty program?
Oh, that's a difficult question. to answer, and I don't have a good one for you. I think the rise of AI and taking a lot of the ardor out of researching and that sort of
Mm,
thing means that there's going to be a greater reliance on by consumers, by customers, of things that look right, and we're not going to interrogate it particularly deeply.
mm,
So there'll probably be, if and I use the pejorative lazy as from a cognitive perspective, not sitting
mm,
on the couch lazy, but
mm,
when I talk about laziness, it's we're designed to save our cognitive resources for decisions that are very important, which means that we try and put on autopilot as much of our day as possible, and AI is going to exacerbate that. So things will have to look really easy to do and really easy to grab. I don't think we're not going to want to invest even more effort in
mm.
the process of discerning which business is right for me. I don't know if that's answered your question.
There wasn't a specific answer. I didn't quite know where it would go, but you took it in an amazing, amazing area of interest because the way you expressed, the mental energy that we have to use all day from the moment we wake up, hence why I wear that black jumper every single day because except today it's hot in Melbourne, I might have to take it off. But the old, I think it was Steve Jobs, just don't make too many decisions, just like you've got your uniform there. And or by the time the end of the day is, and when my wife comes into the room and says, we need to make a decision about it, I think I just got no energy left. I've got nothing. I can't think about that now. I can't do this. It's too much of a bigger decision. And also, I've learned, and I suppose you guide people about the late afternoon meetings, and I'm sure there's also about time clocks and where your energy is about what kind of meetings should be at 4 or 5 o'clock in the day. Because I find I make silly decisions at that time of the day. And I think back in the morning, I think, why did I say or do that at 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon?
Yeah, there was even interesting research with doctors, and they were sort of analysing the rate of prescription for antibiotics during the course of the day, and what they found was that the later in the day, more antibiotics were prescribed, and that's really because doctors were getting fatigued,
Yeah,
and the easiest path for them
yeah,
was to write a script because then they didn't have to debate with their patient who might want because everyone seems to want antibiotics.
or everyone just says Google told me, so
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Here, have something.
yeah,
So what you're experiencing is true. Now, for business people, that does become important in terms of what's the timing of your message, but also
mm,
what's the timing of your meeting.
mm,
As a rule of thumb, if you want people to, I'll use the expression roll over or go with what the easiest option is, it
mm,
can be good to have them in a fatigued state. If you want them to make a decision about, for instance, moving away from the status quo, say you're pitching for new business or what have you, and you're not the incumbent, that's when you would very much want them fresh so that they've got that appetite for change.
mm.
So, or you'd want them so either start of the day or after a break, for instance.
Yeah,
So, yeah, we've talked a little bit about motivation today, and you can see that fluctuate even within ourselves during the course of a day
yeah.
and how that should marry up with the decisions we're making, but also what we're trying to influence other people to do.
Yeah, and behind all of that, as you say, you explained the word lazy, not from as you say on the couch, but more about the conversation when saving your energy for what the big decision, which comes back to loyalty program and the experience that the member has across, every from as I say from onboarding to ongoing. And the simple, the personal, and the valuable. That's the SPV that I use. And simple has really become almost, well, it's still second ranked, but that's not surprising that people want more, they want value, which is then it's simple, then it's personal. But the whole simple area of, simple to understand, simple to join, it's all about energy saving, right? And even the proposition, keeping it simple, no mental gymnastics. And reminds me of a book I read, and I'm going to share it with you. And in fact, I want to ask you a question about books. Have you heard of this book called Obvious Adams?
Yes,
You do know it.
yes.
It's a beautiful, beautiful 40
It's more a
pages.
parable, isn't it? It's
Yeah, it is. It's a parable. Yeah. about obviousness and how to get to that real aha. Oh, that's so obvious, kind of, which is what you should have in all your comms, in your team, in any way you, as you say, communicate. So people just say, not using too much energy. But to get there is work.
That's the curious thing, and particularly because I often get that response, Adam, when I'm sharing things about behavioral science and how to influence behavior. People, in hindsight, say, "Oh, gee, that's so obvious." When I point out, for instance, that people might say they want value,
Yeah.
but do they buy on value?
Yep.
We can debate it. The example I used the other day was people like to buy Australian. They say they want to buy Australian
Yeah.
products, and yet you follow them down the tomato aisle of the supermarket, and their choice changes because it's going to be more on price. And so we can't always take at face value what people say. But yeah, obvious, Adams. Yeah, so to make things obvious is so difficult, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it sort of, when I think of obvious, it's like it means that something has dropped for them. It means that something has coalesced. It's sort of
You know
a
what the
jigsaw.
word they use? He says it's exploded in your mind. He used the words exploded. In fact, I can read it because I read it last night and I thought,
Right.
what a great word. And I'm just looking at my notes and I know we're live and it doesn't really matter, but it just says, because there's 5 tests of obviousness. And number 4 was, does it explode in people's minds? How about that? I love that word. It's
Bit
like,
violent for me. Bit violent for me,
no,
Adam.
well, we won't go down the war analogy because if you talk about marketing and war, I'm sure you'll find every single word.
I like to think of things as brain spas. When you
Yeah.
do read a book or something, and it's sort of the tingle in your brain, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that I think that's a sort of an embodiment of resonance. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, that resonates with me. It's dropped in. I didn't know I was needing it, but I obviously did, and that
Yeah.
makes complete sense to me. The
Yeah.
problem when you're in business is that you do things that might seem obvious, and people don't necessarily
No.
value that. So they're not willing
Well,
necessarily to pay for that because
well,
it almost feels too easy.
but also, you just kind of said back to when we first started this conversation, which is to you, it's obvious. And you've done all the mental work and you've done all
Yeah.
the thinking, and you say, and then people look and say, but I don't get it. Back to, did you take them on the journey? Did you explain the obviousness to get there, kind of thing? So, wow, this conversation is,
That
yeah, sorry, go.
reminds me of an interesting point. Sorry to cut you off,
No,
but we've
go.
talked a lot about minimizing effort today, and that's certainly what we should be seeking to do. You make things easier, and you have to reward people less because it's like as soon as you increase effort, the payoff has to be greater because otherwise it's like, well, why would I bother? But sometimes showing your effort, showing your workings is instrumental. So for instance, if you're dealing with a customer, it's the old, you would have heard of this adage, it's a mechanic or a locksmith, whichever trade it is. And, say it's your engine's running funny and the mechanic sort of taps on a particular point of the engine and it starts like that and said, great, that's $500, please. And the customer is going to say, you only tapped on the engine. And the whole point is, it took me 2 minutes to
Yeah.
2 minutes to tap the engine, 10 years to know where to tap the engine.
Yeah, I love that.
And so making sure that our customer understands that it might be effortless for them, it's not effortless for us. We take their custom very seriously, and we're at pains to make sure that we're shouldering the burden of this so that they don't have to. And that, I think, is what people really appreciate. It's like, oh God, I can take something off my shoulders because I know that my software provider or whomever is looking after it. I actually had an example from my website provider. They sent this whole long list of technical things that were needing to be updated, but under the what this means for you or actions to be taken, it was pretty much, you don't need to do anything, we've done it for you. And it's like, oh, so
Had you coached them in doing that?
I didn't
No,
coach them, but it's certainly, I call it my done before do rule, my
done
done
before
before do
do.
rule. Tell them what you've done.
Done. Oh, done, not dumb. Okay,
Done, no,
done.
no, done, D-O-N-E. tell them what you've done to reduce the burden before you then ask them to do something. When I was working with a bank, for instance, and they had their BSB, their bank, I think, service number or whatever it's called, branch number, change, and that necessitated all of their customers change their direct debits. Now that is a real pain for a customer to get that in a letter.
Yeah.
And so we made sure that we framed it such that we first articulated what we had done. So we've already taken care of ...
Yep.
So all we need you to do is update your direct debit. And so by that, we were able to mitigate the risk of backlash because we've shown our effort.
Yeah. Look, that conversation really appeals to me very, very much from a consultative point of view in terms of, the tapping and the $5,000 for the $1 tap story, and proving to customers and clients that, the 20 years of working and understanding and the depth to give. When they say, can you come and give a 1 hour talk? And I say, yeah, it's not about the hour. It's about the insights that have taken any number of years to get to add value. But then again, that's another conversation. I'm not asking Bri here today to give me some advice, because you have already in my previous and setting me up early days. I'd like to round off back to, wow, what a great conversation. I think every loyalty program and customer loyalty person out there, we all do know that behavioral science, behavioral economics, psychology in loyalty programs is so evident and so powerful. So people like you, Bri, and a few others out there are really important to keep educating us, I think. How can we close off this back to the context of customer loyalty and or loyalty programs and behavioral science? I'll let you answer that in any way you like.
Well, I think one of the myths is that customers are loyal. And I think instead we need to focus on cost, convenience, and a great experience.
Cost, convenience, and a great experience. What a way to finish. I think that's beautiful. As I say, for everyone out there who dares to get to the end of this 40 or so minutes and is now still listening and watching, Bri, you're just a delight. I highly recommend you for anyone out there that either wants to look at the way they structure their pricing, and or are they even saying the right words in their proposals? Maybe I think we should have another go again. I think I've gone back to old habits or become lazy again. Bri, thanks so much. I really appreciate having you. I was very excited about today when you said yes. It's that old story. I have to just say that, I said to myself, I've known you a long time. I thought, I'd really love to ask you, but you might say no. And then I thought to myself, who cares? Let me just do it. And guess what could happen? They can either say yes or no. And you said yes. So I think that's an advice to everybody. The worst that can happen is somebody says, not for me. And you didn't. So,
well, I see you very much as a leader in the loyalty field, Adam. And I know I've given you a hard time about loyalty today, but I think you are a leader because you think so deeply and expansively about it, and you're willing to have these sorts of conversations in order to get better results for hardworking businesses and their lucky customers. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a lot. Everybody grab Bri's, where can they get that blog? How do they sign on your website? Yeah?
Yeah, Bri, not the real estate agent, Bri, briwilliams.com.
Crazy. Don't believe AI, seriously. I actually didn't realize. I thought, I don't remember you ever telling me you were a real estate agent. I just couldn't understand why it said that.
No, accountant, psychologist, behavioral specialist, not a real estate agent.
And the TikTok influencer. Love it. For everybody out there, thanks very much. I'll see you on the other side of the world.